Woosa, wake up South Africa. You've been sleeping far too long. Wake up South Africa. Now come along and sing this song.
Sutapa, who better to speak on the topic of Srila Prabhupada than one who embodies and continues to share his divine graces teachings. We are sincerely excited to have you with us today. We feel your illustrious bio does not do you any justice, and therefore we look forward to hearing your insights on the topic. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind introduction. Mpo, is that the correct pronunciation? Okay,
Correct.
wonderful. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And thank you to Sabyasachi, my good friend, my brother, for allowing me to come and be with you all today. Nice to see some of you, familiar faces. I hope we'll have a good discussion today. Remembering Srila Prabhupada. Tomorrow is Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. A day of great meditation, a day of great reflection, a day of inspiration, and also a day of transcendental lamentation also. So it's a day tomorrow of many, many emotions. And today is an opportunity just to reflect on Srila Prabhupada and what he means to us and how to continue his legacy, which is really the goal of our life. So I'll share a few things with you. Things that have captured my imagination about Srila Prabhupada, things that really fascinate me about his personality. And then I'll share a few ideas of what it means to follow Srila Prabhupada for all of us who are endeavoring to do that. And then I'm going to kind of open up the floor and just be happy to hear from everyone and take any questions or comments or anything that else that might be there. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarine. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You can see my PowerPoint, okay? Yeah, you can see. Okay, good. All right, so today we're, as mentioned, discussing Srila Prabhupada. In this world, gurus, our respective gurus that we have, anyone who's a guru in this world, they are extremely rare. But it's said that even more rare than a guru is an acharya. An acharya is a very, very special and specific type of guru, a distinguished guru. It's said that a guru teaches their disciples, but an acharya teaches many, many generations to come even after they've departed this world. It's said that a guru protects his immediate disciples and protects the immediate people that he's looking after. But it's said that an acharya protects a whole sampradaya, protects a whole lineage of teachings and preserves the sanctity over time and space. It's said that a guru may make many, many disciples, but an acharya doesn't just make disciples, an acharya makes gurus. That's the power of an acharya. So you can see that an acharya and their influence is so much profound in terms of its impact that it has on the world. And Srila Prabhupada was one such acharya. For all ISKCON devotees, he's the founder acharya. And his teachings, his mood, his mission becomes the standard by which we judge anything and by which we make decisions. And so knowing Srila Prabhupada, knowing his personality, knowing his heart, knowing his desires and his vision is so important for a devotee, because what can be more powerful in terms of making our life successful. And so today I want to share with you some of my reflections on Srila Prabhupada's personality. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said, Tandra Vakya Kriya Mudra Vigyayana Bhujoy, that a devotee of Krishna, a pure devotee, is so deep, is so profound in their consciousness that no one can understand the mind, words, and activities of a devotee. We may see something, but the totality of what is going on in the consciousness of that devotee will not be accessible to us. Yet, we still have to try. We have to try to understand the character, the mood, the mission. And that's what we'll try to do today. And when we reflect on Srila Prabhupada's personality, his character, it's inspiring like anything. We have many Prabhupada disciples at the Bhaktivedanta Manor in London. And one of those disciples, Kishore Prabhu, I asked him once that, what do you feel like on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day? When you come in front of Srila Prabhupada on his disappearance day, what does that feel like for you? A disciple of Prabhupada who got initiated by Prabhupada. And he had a very profound answer. He said, every time I come in front of Srila Prabhupada, I feel challenged. Just being in front of Srila Prabhupada challenges you. It makes you feel a little uncomfortable. It makes you feel like I need to be doing more. I need to be giving more. I need to be reaching out more. And so when we think of Prabhupada's personality, it's a healthy challenge for us to grow in our spiritual life. And what I'm going to try to do for you today is show you how Prabhupada's character spanned seeming opposites, but he was able to incorporate many, many different things within his personality, where for us, we would tend to focus on one or the other, but Srila Prabhupada had all angles in his personality. And I'll try to explain a little bit to you what I mean by that through different examples. But let me begin here. One of Srila Prabhupada's most amazing qualities was that he was so deep in his relationship with Krishna. Here you see in this beautiful picture, this is Srila Prabhupada who stayed in the Radha Damodar temple for 6 years. Here he would take his prasadam, and outside of this window you can see in this picture here, he would look out and he would see the samadhi and the bhajan kutir of Rupa Goswami. And here in Radha Damodar, Srila Prabhupada was meditating, was preparing, was praying as to how he'd be able to fulfill the order of his spiritual master and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. But here, Srila Prabhupada was so deeply rooted. It's explained in his biographies, his daily schedule when he was in Radha Damodar. He would wake up very early, and the first 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of the day, he'd just be reading and he'd just be chanting. And then it said about 10 o'clock every day, Prabhupada would leave Radha Damodar temple, and then he'd go to all the main Goswami temples in Vrindavan and take darshan. And then it said Prabhupada would come back to Radha Damodar about 11 o'clock, 11:30. And then on his 3-tiered cooker, Srila Prabhupada would make his lunch. And Srila Prabhupada was only really eating once a day. And he would cook very quickly. Prabhupada used to say, cooking, that's a 15-20-minute job. It shouldn't take you all day. And Prabhupada will cook very simply. And then he would take prasad. And then after the Rajabhog Arti of Radha Damodar, then Srila Prabhupada would take a short nap. And then Srila Prabhupada again would just be reading, chanting, and specifically Prabhupada would be writing. And here for many years, we see how Prabhupada just lived the life of bhajan. He was so deeply absorbed in his bhajan. One Babaji at the Radha Kund, who witnessed many sadhus and many ascetics, when the devotees met him once, he said, in my life, I observed so many sadhus who have come to Vrindavan, but I never saw anyone who had such intense bhajan as Bhaktivedanta Swami. And he appreciated how deep Prabhupada was in his bhajan. One time, Prabhupada, he saw a picture of Radha Damodar in the Nectar of Instruction book. They had printed the picture of Radha Damodar, and Prabhupada just looked at it and closed his eyes and said, those days were too much ecstatic. So Prabhupada was just, it was too much ecstatic. Prabhupada was just doing his bhajan there, and he was just so happy. He was so deeply close to Krishna, so deeply rooted. But that same Prabhupada, he then just went and he just reached out. He just went to the Lower East Side. He just went to New York. He just went to the place where there were potheads, acid heads, hippies, bohemians, alcoholics, dropouts. And one newspaper said, the Swami has taught the way how to reach God. Turn off, sing out, and fall in. And this in this newspaper, they had written that the mantra the Swami has brought is cheaper than acid, sweeter than pot, and non-bustable by fuzz. Like this is the kind of people Prabhupada was engaging with. And when Prabhupada heard that newspaper article describing what he was doing, Prabhupada said, it's very nice. They have explained in their own words. In other words, it was such a different world. It was such a different culture. But Prabhupada was just reaching out. So this is amazing. Who is able to be like this? What kind of sadhu can you find like this? Who's so deep, who's so much in the spiritual world, who's so much with Krishna, who's so much relishing the Bhagavatam and the holy name, but at the same time is just able to reach out, connect, relate, and feel totally comfortable in a culture which externally is completely alien. This is Srila Prabhupada. He was able to do both things. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he once said that the best Gostiya Nandi is the Bhajana Nandi who preaches. In other words, because Srila Prabhupada was so deep, he was able to also reach out in such a powerful way. And so here we get the first glimpse of how Srila Prabhupada's personality was just like spanning different worlds. He had these both aspects to himself. Here's another amazing thing about Srila Prabhupada's personality. Prabhupada was always thinking big, isn't it? Prabhupada said, my disease is that I cannot think small. So here you see in the very early days in Mayapur, when Mayapur was just a paddy field. And one day Prabhupada was on a morning walk very early in the Mayapur history. And Prabhupada turned to Bhagavat Prabhu and he said, you should buy all the land in Mayapur. So already that was like a very lofty instruction. And then the next thing Prabhupada said is, and then once you've bought all the land in Mayapur, you should apply to the Indian government for independence. And we should create the country of Mayapur. It was like, it was already lofty. And then Prabhupada just took it to another level. And then Prabhupada said, and then once we have the country of Mayapur, we will have our own currency, 3 Chaitanyas, 5 Chaitanyas, 10 Chaitanyas. And that was just like an economic system on top of that. And then Prabhupada just said, and then we will have all our temples all over the world, and they will be embassies of the country of Mayapur. And the devotee's mind was just blown of how big Srila Prabhupada was thinking. He was not thinking small. He was someone who had vision, isn't it? Prabhupada was on the New York bench with Mr. Rubin. And this Mr. Rubin, he looked at Prabhupada in the, this is before anything was established. And he said, Prabhupada just looked like some kind of Elijah. He just looked like a messenger, a prophet. But I looked at him and he just looked like a, like a poor mendicant. And then Prabhupada said to him, there are temples, there are books, there are devotees, there is a worldwide movement, but only time is separating us. And no one could understand. No one could appreciate at that time. So Prabhupada was just thinking so big, and just see from his vision of Mayapur in the early days, what Mayapur has become now. And it's very interesting here, if you see in this picture, then right on the left-hand side, you'll see this little mud hut here. And that was the first little mud hut in which Srila Prabhupada stayed in Mayapur. And Prabhupada said, doesn't matter how big this temple becomes, never demolish that mud hut. Because from an architectural point of view, when you walk into like a temple of the Vedic planetarium, on your left-hand side, the first thing you don't expect to see is a mud hut. It's like, it doesn't really go with the vibe of, but Prabhupada said, keep it. I want everyone to see that this is where we started and this is where we are now. Because that was Prabhupada. He was just thinking so big. But now let me tell you another amazing thing about Prabhupada. He wasn't just thinking big, but he was paying attention to the detail. You see, sometimes we think so big, but we don't pay attention to the detail. Or sometimes we pay so much attention to the detail that we can't think of the bigger picture. But Prabhupada was doing both. And one example is in the Krishna Balaram temple, another beautiful temple that Prabhupada established. You know what Prabhupada once said? He said, I'm judging the entire management of the Krishna Balaram temple on whether the bell rings on time. So there used to, if you go to Krishna Balaram temple today, there's a bell. And Prabhupada put this bell there. He personally made sure it came to Krishna Balaram temple. And what he wanted is that every hour it would sound as many times as the hour. So if it's 10 o'clock, it has to ring 10 times on the hour. And he wanted it to ring every half an hour as well. But the thing is, unfortunately, in India, these guys, the security, they always fall asleep. They're a little bit spaced out. So it was not happening. And so Prabhupada, sometimes he would be awake in the night, but the bell would not go off. And then Prabhupada would call the devotee, why did the bell not go off? Make sure the bell is going off. And the temple president, the leaders, they had so many complicated things to deal with. But Prabhupada told them, I'm measuring the temple on whether the bell rings. So that even the temple president, who was so busy, had to go there sometimes and personally ring the bell, because Prabhupada was having great attention to detail. It wasn't just about doing big things. but it was about doing big things with attention to detail and quality. Prabhupada just didn't just do big things, but he also took care of the devotees. If the devotees were sick, if the devotees were poorly, Prabhupada, he would go and he would personally give them remedies as to how they could solve their different health difficulties. He was also caring, he was also kind, he was also interested in every little thing. Now that's amazing. That's the real quality of an amazing leader, an amazing teacher, that they can look at the bigger picture and they can also pay attention to the detail. So this is another aspect of why Srila Prabhupada was such an incredible personality, because he had both of these sides to him, which sometimes seemingly are in conflict. Here's another one. Srila Prabhupada was such a scholar, right? He took the ancient scriptures, all these profound commentaries, all this tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is the most advanced theology in creation. And what did he do? He made it accessible. But he didn't just make it accessible, he explained it in such a way that anyone could understand it. How do you take a theology like the theology of the Bhagavatam and then just present it in such a way that people who have no background in Vedic philosophy can grasp it? This is Srila Prabhupada. It's said of the Goswamis, Nana Shastra Vicharane Kunipuno Sadharma Samstapako. They studied everything. And what were they able to do? They studied everything so well that they were able to extract the essence of everything and present that, Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane, present that for the benefit of the world. We don't have the time to read all of the scriptures. Even if we did have the time to read all of the scriptures, we don't have the patience to read all of the scriptures. And even if we had the time and the patience to read all of the scriptures, we wouldn't have the intelligence to be able to extract the essence. So Srila Prabhupada did it for us. And we may not be aware, but when we're reading the Bhaktivedanta purports, we are reading the cream of all the commentaries of the Vaishnavacharyas, because Srila Prabhupada just extracted everything. And so Srila Prabhupada was such a scholar, such an intelligent, spiritually, transcendentally intelligent personality. But at the same time, Srila Prabhupada was so streetwise. Srila Prabhupada was so practical. Srila Prabhupada was such an organizer, a manager. One time, Vinananda Maharaj, he took sannyas. And so he looked at Prabhupada and he said, Prabhupada, now I've taken sannyas, I can just preach. I just want to preach. I'll just preach. And Prabhupada said to him, you should be like me. In the morning, I give the Bhagavatam class. And in the afternoon, I go to the bank. In other words, Prabhupada was a scholar, but he was very, very streetwise as well. He knew how to function in the world. He knew how to get things done. He knew how to cut business deals. Prabhupada, he was the best businessman. Like Prabhupada said, no one can defeat me. I'm a Calcutta boy. So Prabhupada, he knew how to deal with the world. He knew how to deal with practicalities. He knew how to manage a worldwide movement. Srila Prabhupada was just so practical as well as profound in his consciousness. And so who has these things? Sometimes we find someone who is very, very scholarly, but they're not so able to deal with the complexities of the world. And sometimes we find someone is very complexly able to connect with the world, but they're not very deep in their thinking. Prabhupada had both, because he was a universal teacher. He had all angles to his personality. Here's another one. Prabhupada was a preserver of tradition. He showed the devotees how to cook. He showed the devotees how to worship the deities. Srila Prabhupada even showed the devotees how to clean a floor, Vedic style. And Prabhupada got on his own knees and showed the devotees how to do that. Srila Prabhupada brought an age-old tradition of spiritual culture and shared that with the whole world. He preserved it. He showed them why it's such a beautiful thing and how following this culture and tradition can help someone in their spiritual endeavors. And so Srila Prabhupada didn't just give up his tradition because he was coming to a new culture, but he brought that spiritual tradition and he shared that spiritual tradition with the world he was coming to. But along with that, Srila Prabhupada was incredible because he was also an innovator of tradition. Srila Prabhupada was able to preserve the essence, but at the same time adjust the details. And this was perhaps the reason, or one of the main reasons, why Srila Prabhupada was able to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, because he was able to preserve, but at the same time, he was always innovating as well. And so on the right-hand side, we see that Prabhupada, he came to New York and then he told the devotees that, why don't you go and start a temple in San Francisco on the West Coast? And they did. And they organized an event there called the Mantra Rock Dance. And this was a far cry from what Prabhupada had been used to. In a huge auditorium, it was a concert, there was intoxication, there was rock bands, there were strobe lights, there was all kinds of people doing all kinds of things. And the devotees had organized this event. And in the middle of it, at 11 o'clock in the night, when the atmosphere was reaching fever pitch, then they brought Srila Prabhupada into the mantra rock dance. And as Prabhupada walked in, everyone, thousands of people, they made way. Prabhupada walked into this. I mean, it was, you can imagine what it must have felt like for Prabhupada. It was so different. There was strobe lights, and then they had these projections of Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield. And then Prabhupada came onto the stage, and then Allen Ginsberg, he was one of the beat poets at that time, very eccentric character. Then he introduced Prabhupada. He said, this is the Swami. He's come from India with an age-old mantra. And then Allen Ginsberg began chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And then later on, Prabhupada took over the kirtan. And as Prabhupada was chanting in the mantra rock dance, everyone was jumping. It was going ecstatic. And as the energy was getting higher and higher and higher, then it reached a crescendo. And then Prabhupada just stopped. And then Prabhupada began to leave. And then Prabhupada looked at one of the devotees behind him and said, this is no place for a brahmachari. So it was, Prabhupada was just ready though. He was ready to innovate. He was ready to move with the times. He was ready to adjust. He opened up Krishna consciousness for all genders. He opened up Krishna consciousness for all nationalities. He opened up Krishna consciousness for all social groups. He opened up Krishna consciousness for people from all cultures. Srila Prabhupada innovated, but he also preserved. Who is able to do both? Many teachers preserved, but they were not able to make spirituality relevant. And many other teachers made spirituality relevant, but in the process, they lost the essence, they diluted. But Srila Prabhupada was able to do both together. And that's what makes him such an incredible teacher. Here's another one. Srila Prabhupada was so resilient. He was so strong, even when there were challenges, even when there was opposition, even when there was criticism. Srila Prabhupada just kept going. Here on the left, you have the picture of Juhu. When Prabhupada tried to build the temple here, there were so many difficulties. To begin with, the land that the devotees were living on was rat infested. It was snake infested. It was a swamp. The devotees were just getting sick left, right, and center. It was such a struggle. Not only that, the devotees couldn't fundraise. They didn't have money. Not only that, the person who was selling them the land was basically trying to cheat them. And not only that, there were dacoits and so many people who were coming to attack the devotees. The devotees themselves came to Prabhupada and they said, Prabhupada, I don't think this is the greatest place to build a temple. Maybe we just need to go somewhere else. But Prabhupada was resilient. He said, no, I made a promise to Radha Ras Bihari that I'll build a temple for them here. And therefore you can go if you want, but I'm not going to go. And Prabhupada was just so strong. Prabhupada once said, everywhere I went in the world, there was opposition. When I went to Mumbai, there was opposition from the municipality. When I went to Vrindavan, there was opposition from the caste Goswamis. They were complaining, why have you given initiation to non-Indians? He said, when I went to Mayapur, there was opposition from my own god brothers. They were criticizing me that I have changed so many things. And when I went to the West, there was opposition from deprogrammers, saying that, you know, the Krishna consciousness movement was brainwashing people. So Prabhupada said, just see my life. Wherever I went, there was always opposition, either from the Goswamis, either from the government, either from my god brothers, or either from deprogrammers. There was always opposition. But Srila Prabhupada said, I never became discouraged. One time, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj asked Prabhupada, there's so many problems in ISKCON. How do you keep going? And Prabhupada said, I never saw problems. I only saw opportunities to serve the order of my spiritual master. So he never saw problems. He just saw that there's an opportunity to serve what is so dear to my spiritual master. So Prabhupada was so resilient. He could just stay. But at the same time, Prabhupada was so flexible. Sometimes when things were not working out, then he would just say, okay, clearly things are not working out here. We just need to move somewhere else. Krishna's got a better plan. And so here you see in the 1950s, Prabhupada tried to start the movement in a place called Jhansi, where he registered the League of Devotees. But what happened is that again, there was some kind of intrigue and he lost that building. And when he lost that building, Prabhupada didn't decide to stay there. He just decided to walk. He walked away. And Prabhupada just walked away and he said, yes, Krishna has a better plan. Krishna has a bigger opportunity for me. Krishna has something more lined up, something better. And so Prabhupada just left. And eventually he went to America, he went to New York, San Francisco, and the Krishna consciousness movement took over. So sometimes Prabhupada was resilient. He stayed. He dug his heels in the ground, even when it was tough. And other times Prabhupada was just flexible. He was seeing that, no, Krishna has another plan. Krishna has another desire. And so let's just move with that desire. And he was ready to adjust. A devotee has to have both. We got to be strong. We got to be resilient. It's not that every time there's a difficulty, we just give up. But at the same time, we got to hear Krishna. And if we feel like Krishna's telling us, no, it's time to move on, we got to be ready and willing to be flexible. It's hard sometimes to decipher when to be resilient, when to carry on, and when to be flexible. One has to hear the heart, hear the super soul, and take guidance from the Vaishnavas. Here's another aspect. Prabhupada was bold and strong. Isn't it? Here's a picture of Prabhupada in France having that famous conversation with Cardinal Danilou. And Prabhupada's picking up the point. You know, the cardinal is asking him, why do you guys worship the cow? You know, there are children who are starving and you're worshiping the cow. You should kill the cow and you should just feed the starving children. And Prabhupada was trying to get through to him that there's a soul in every single living entity. And the cardinal just couldn't get it. And Prabhupada just kept pushing on that point, that in your scriptures, it says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill. Prabhupada said the art of debate is that when you find a weak point, you just keep hitting that point. You just keep hitting it again and again, and don't move, just hit it. And so Prabhupada was just, he was trying to get onto other subjects. Prabhupada just hitting the same point, saying, you don't know the first thing about spiritual knowledge, which is that the soul is pervading within all living beings. And therefore, how can you just kill the animals indiscriminately like that? The cow is a mother. And so Prabhupada was bold, he was strong. He was not just, it was not just that, okay, this is an interfaith gathering. We got to build bridges. We got to show respect for each other. Prabhupada was bold. He was also challenging, and he was also exposing illusion, exposing misunderstanding, exposing deviation when he saw it. But at the same time, Prabhupada was so kind. Prabhupada was so sensitive. Prabhupada was so childlike. Here on the right, you see a picture of Prabhupada in Butler in 1965. It's one of my favorite pictures because in this picture, the small boy, Bridge, he would call Prabhupada Swami Jesus. He just loved Prabhupada. This is the first place Prabhupada stayed in America. And the first time that Bridge kind of walked, he was just a toddler, and then he started walking. And Prabhupada saw Bridge walk for the first time, and Prabhupada was just like ecstatic. You can see in this picture. And you think like, he's with Krishna, he's in the spiritual world, he's merged in the bhavas of the, you know, highest experiences of love of Godhead. Why is he, but he was so down to earth as well. He was so kind, he was so sensitive, he was so human, he was so relatable. And that's the amazing thing about Prabhupada, that he had both of these sides to his character. Some people are very kind and sensitive, but they're not able to be bold and strong and assertive when required. And some people are so bold and assertive, but when it comes to being like soft-hearted, they're not able to do that. They're just very hard. But Prabhupada had both sides. This is what made him such an amazing personality. And so what I try to do to you, or do for you today, is just share. I'm just going to open it up. I'll say one final thing and then I'll just open it up. What I was trying to share with you today is how Prabhupada's personality is so incredible, because it spanned many, many different extremes. And because Prabhupada was so deep in his relationship with Krishna, he could incorporate all of these different extremes and touch people's hearts and make such an impact in the world. And so tomorrow, as we kind of prepare to honor Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day, we can take some moments to think of how enchanting Prabhupada's character was and how we can try in some small way. We can never be like Prabhupada. We cannot be like that. But at least we can begin to take some of these beautiful gems of Prabhupada's different angles of his personality and see how we can truly represent him by having some aspects of those within our own personality. And I'm going to end with this. On our mind tomorrow is not just glorifying Prabhupada, but rededicating ourselves to Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was asked to give a speech at the Vyasa Puja of his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, then he gave a speech and he made like one very, very powerful point. He said, worship of the spiritual master is not just a festival of fruits and flowers, but the one who follows the order of the spiritual master, they are the ones that truly glorify the spiritual master. And so if we want to follow Prabhupada, then the one beautiful thing we have is instructions. We have the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. But you'll notice that Srila Prabhupada gave many, many different instructions, and sometimes those instructions are seemingly conflicting or seemingly contradictory. And so, along with Srila Prabhupada's instructions, we also need to know the context within which those instructions were given. Also, what we need to know is the intention that Prabhupada had behind it. When we're able to understand these three things, then we'll be able to truly understand Srila Prabhupada's heart. We have to understand his instructions, but we have to understand with any given instruction, what was the context within which that instruction was told. And not just that, what was the intention that Prabhupada had behind those instructions. When Srila Prabhupada was personally present, then the intention, the context, and the instructions was very, very clear because Prabhupada was here, so he could tell, he could audibly say, this is my intention. We knew the context, we knew the instruction. But when Srila Prabhupada leaves the world, then sometimes we don't have Prabhupada directly to ask him, what's the intention? And therefore we have to look at context and instructions. And what happens is that gradually in the world, when many, many Srila Prabhupada disciples leave the world, then oftentimes we won't even have the context because they were the ones that could give the context. And therefore, as time goes by, in one sense, it becomes more challenging to follow Srila Prabhupada. However, if one is diligent, if one is deep, if one invests the time in really trying to understand Srila Prabhupada, then we'll see that everything is available to decode the instructions, the context, and the intention so we can actually follow Prabhupada. And what do the instructions consist of? Obviously, Srila Prabhupada's books, obviously his lectures, his conversations, his letters, and his personal interactions. And so this is really the challenge for every devotee, to really understand Prabhupada's instructions, the context within which they were given, and the intention that he had behind them. And then to study all of these things very, very deeply so that we can truly become followers of Prabhupada, not just external followers of Prabhupada. You see, I would say there are 3 levels of followers of Prabhupada, one way to look at it. One is those that just glorify Prabhupada. A little higher than those are those who glorify Prabhupada and try to serve Prabhupada, but don't take the time to deeply understand Prabhupada's intention, his mood. And then I would say higher than that are those who glorify Prabhupada, those who serve Prabhupada, and those who take the time to deeply try to understand what is the mood, the mission, and the heart of Srila Prabhupada. And so that in today's day and age, in today's context, they can then apply that understanding to fulfill the order of Srila Prabhupada. And so, yeah, these are some things that I wanted to share with you as we think of preparing for tomorrow. Because as I said, Prabhupada's disappearance day is a day of different emotions. There's great happiness that we were connected to Prabhupada, that we are connected to Prabhupada. There's great sadness. Many of us, maybe we never met Prabhupada, and we almost feel like that's also sometimes a very sad thing that we feel, oh, I never saw Prabhupada like that. So it's a time of great sadness. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a time of great challenge as well. Because when we come in front of Srila Prabhupada every day, we feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm not reciprocating in an appropriate way. We feel uncomfortable. We feel like I need to extend myself more. And so what I tried to do today is just share some of these things so that we can think about how we can extend ourselves in an intelligent way so that we can really serve Prabhupada in a powerful way. And so, yeah, perhaps I'll pause there and maybe ask some of you whether you have any comments or perhaps questions or anything else you may want to share. I guess we have a little bit of time.
Thank you so very much, Sutapa Prabhu. Before we move to questions and comments, I just wanted to appreciate you for making more human a personality that is truly superhuman and supernatural, in a way that we can identify with and appreciate Srila Prabhupada a lot more deeply. So thank you for that. If I could encapsulate your presentation with 3 I's, I'd say it was intelligent, informational, and incredibly inspiring. So thank you very much. I'm now going to move to the comment section here on Zoom. Now, Bafana, you've put yourself in hot water today by typing a comment in Zulu to a host who is bedding. So I'm going to ask you to kindly read your comment for us and translate it so Prabhu knows exactly what you're saying. I would read it, but I don't want to butcher a language I respect so much. So please go ahead, Bafana, you are under pressure.
Hello, Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I could not express it much better, your presentation, other than saying it in my own language, Zulu. So it's as simple as saying something to the effect of, thank you to Srila Prabhupada, such an overseer, such a leader. So we were dead, but he has risen us from dead. So I'm just expressing my gratitude to Srila Prabhupada by saying thank you. Thank you. Thank you, host.
Thank you so much. Yes. It's an interesting comment you make in the Shastra. Is often mentioned that if one is not connected to the Supreme Lord through the spiritual master in service, then even though they're living, they're dead. And so life means to serve. Without service, there's no life. Without service, there's no meaning. Without service, there's nothing to get up for in the morning. One devotee he used to say to me, the best alarm clock you can have is purpose. Because when your eyes open in the morning and you have purpose, it doesn't matter how, whether your alarm bell goes off or not, you will wake up because you've got life, you've got meaning, you've got something to do. And so Srila Prabhupada, he made us alive. He gave us life because he gave us a vision, he gave us a purpose, he gave us service. And because of that service, life becomes meaningful. So sometimes service is difficult, you know, there's so much anxiety and there's so much sacrifice that needs to be made. And there's so many complexities that come from service. But without service, there's no life. And so tomorrow we're praying to Prabhupada that how can we rededicate ourselves in service? Because that then it's a meaningful life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bafana, you gave us a very incredible translation, but you robbed us of the opportunity to hear isiZulu. So can you kindly read it for us? Can you kindly read it for us?
Okay. So siyabonga ngalolu hlobo lomholi. Siyabonga kakhulu besifile, usivusile. Udumo lonke sulunika kuye. Ngiyabonga.
Shesa, thank you. Thank you, Bafana. We have a comment on Facebook from Bonolo Ratsidi, who says, Hare Krishna, then clap, clap, clap. So much to be done, says Bonolo. I think we can all agree after this presentation that there's a lot to be done and that we can draw on Srila Prabhupada's inspiration to achieve it all. We also have a comment from Tusa Etsile. Tusa Etsile says, I can understand that the mind or eye that perceives the intention as well as the context may do so in a variety of ways, depending from person to person. Now, the question is, which dimension is acceptable and why?
Yeah, this is a great question. Everyone has their own understanding of what Srila Prabhupada would have wanted in any situation. Everyone has their own Prabhupada in one sense. If you ask someone, who's Prabhupada for you? And they may say Prabhupada was the bold, the strong, the uncompromising preacher of the truth. And if you ask someone else, who was Prabhupada? They will say Prabhupada was so kind, he was so loving, he was like a father, he was so liberal and accommodating, and which is the right one? Both of them are. So when we're in a movement, different devotees may have different realizations on what was Prabhupada's intention, or what was Prabhupada's mood, or what would Prabhupada have done in this situation. So I would say a few things are important. Number one, we must always respect. We must always respect that within a movement, there may be a diversity of opinions on what Prabhupada wanted, and we should respect that. That's okay. Different devotees can have different opinions. Number two, I think we need to have more dialogue. I think when we come in contact with people who have a different vision of what Prabhupada wanted to us, sometimes we tend to distance ourselves from such people. We enter an echo chamber. You know what an echo chamber is? It's when you surround yourself with people who believe the same things as you. So sometimes I think what we need to do in a movement is have more dialogue between people who have different realizations about Prabhupada. And through that dialogue, we all elevate our understanding. And the third thing is that whoever is claiming to have a understanding or a certain perspective of Prabhupada's intention, they must be able to present evidence for that. They must be able to show in Srila Prabhupada's books, in his lectures, through his conduct, why that is the case. And one thing that's very important is that we must also take into account all of the pieces of evidence which may go against what we may think Prabhupada's intention was. And we must also deal with that as well. And so in terms of understanding Prabhupada's intention, as we said, Tandra Vakya Kriya Mudra Vigyayana Bhujoy, to understand the mind of a Vaishnava is not easy, but we have to try. And Srila Prabhupada thankfully has given us so much so that we can better understand his heart. So it's a great adventure. And I think the fact that we have different realizations of Prabhupada should not be a problem, but rather it should be a great opportunity for dialogue. And through that dialogue, a greater relationship, appreciation, and understanding of Prabhupada will come about. I think you're on mute.
It's because I was going with everything you were saying. I thought it might be better if I mute. What a powerful contribution you just made there. Thank you so much, Sutapa. We have one last comment from Satyarani Dasi, who says, Haribol Prabhu, thanks so much for the class. I really appreciated how you presented how Srila Prabhupada had such balance in his character and qualities. It's so rare to find that combination. Satyarani, I think that you are summarizing all of our feelings. And I think that's also what I most appreciated about the presentation today, is the balance and the qualities, characteristics, and leadership traits of Srila Prabhupada that you shared with us. Okay, so I'm now going to proceed to read all of our notifications. Please bear with us and be patient, and preferably grab a notebook just to jot down any notifications that apply to you or your interests. I also ask that everyone kindly stay on the call until I am done reading all of the notifications so that you can hear Prabhu's closing commentaries and inputs. Okay. You can visit Sutapa's website at www.tatva.co to find out more about his work and various initiatives. Also, kindly visit, like, share, and follow WUSA social media platforms that include Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube through the handle at WUSA108. Please like, share, and subscribe, good people. You can also join the WUSA morning japa sessions every morning from 5 to 7 a.m. Standard South African time. Details around the daily program will be communicated in the WUSA weekly WhatsApp group. The books are the Basis Book Club, is a jam-packed session of reading and sharing of realizations, which is taking place every Thursday evening via Zoom. You are more than welcome to participate and take advantage of this wonderful association regularly. You can also catch the Wisdom Readings series, an extension of the Books Are the Basis Book Club, like every evening except Thursdays, on Facebook and YouTube from 7 to 7:30 p.m. South African time. Also, our heart-to-heart Vaishnavi Circle is happening via Zoom every Friday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Standard South African time with Her Grace Mother Brajalila, featuring other various senior Vaishnavis. Visit wusa.online to find out more. Register for the CKC Cubed Kavya Corner Poetry and Creativity Workshop right now. Visit wusa.online on the Arts and Crafts at House of Wusa page and click on the event banner to register. The Creative Krishna Conscious Content Creators Program is an international collaborative effort through Quiddity Concept Magazine, here at Creatives Helping Creatives Network, a preaching initiative through empowerment. You are also welcome to join the WUSA Wednesday discussions from 7 until 8 p.m. Standard South African time, which focus on WUSA's campaign to ensure a more racially inclusive distribution of Krishna consciousness in disadvantaged communities, and work towards developing ideas geared towards inclusive, sustainable growth. The Zoom link to these Wednesday meetings is available at wusa.online/campaigns. You can also visit change.org, as you can see on the screen now, to follow the WUSA advocacy campaign titled Allow Devotees of ISKCON South Africa a Voice in Solving Existing Racial Imbalances, to properly familiarize yourself with the WUSA effort, which is now observing the latest developments around the reconstitution of the National Council, following WUSA's initial cited discussions with relevant ISKCON leaders. You are also invited to join the WUSA weekly WhatsApp group via the link at wusa.online to receive regular activity updates and communications. Please note that this group is for quick announcements and will not be used for spam. Only admins can post. Lastly, visit our Sunday morning inspiration page on the WUSA website to let us know what classes, talks, or discussions you may be interested in having, or if you may wish to hear from a particular speaker, and we will try our best to serve and satisfy your requests. Okay, that's it as far as notifications are concerned. Sutapa, Prabhu, if there are any closing remarks you'd like to make, now would be the time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess I'll just end by saying, there's a South Indian Acharya called Pillai Lokacharya, and I think he sums it up really nicely. Who is a true disciple? Because all of us, we're trying to become true disciples of our spiritual masters, of Srila Prabhupada. So he said a true disciple does three things. Number one, they carry forward the intellectual legacy of the spiritual master. That means they carry forward the teachings, the philosophy, the literature, and the worldview that the spiritual master offers. That's the first thing. The second thing the true disciple does is they carry forward the physical legacy of the spiritual master. That means the buildings, the temple, the movement, the mission, the everything that the spiritual master gave in terms of initiatives and projects, they carry that forward. And the third thing that the true disciple does is they carry forward the fame of the spiritual master. They become a living representation of what the spiritual master and contact with him can do for someone. In other words, they become a good disciple, they become a good example, they become an inspiring personality themselves. And simply by seeing the disciple, the spiritual master is glorified and becomes famous through their disciples. So this is the great challenge that, as we remember Srila Prabhupada, who disappeared from our physical vision but remains always there in his instructions. We have to somehow carry forward his intellectual legacy. We have to carry forward his physical legacy, and we have to carry forward his fame, and become qualified to be called followers of Prabhupada, because it's not just a festival of fruits and flowers. It's a festival in which we rededicate ourselves to following the mood and mission of His Divine Grace. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. We are grateful and indebted to you, and what a powerful way to end. Now, Prabhu dropped some impressive bombs in today's session. So I ask that all of you watch it again and share it with others so that we can tweet those tweetables that he gave us today. Thank you once again to everyone who joined us for being with us this morning. And for one last time, Sutapa Prabhu, we are eternally grateful. Thank you.